Unit 1. Young and Talented. Listening 1. Read and listen.
Super Kids. There are young, talented people everywhere. There are 5-year-olds who can play the violin. There are 10-year-old opera singers who perform in famous concert halls. There are 13-year-old gymnasts in the Olympics, and many more children like this all over the world. What are these gifted children like? Let's meet some of them. Name.
Asif Malik.
Age.
12.
Country.
India.
Talent.
Painting. Nobody in my family is artistic, so they were surprised when I started painting seriously. I was about 4 years old. At first, I painted trees and flowers. Now I paint portraits of my family and friends. I enter competitions, and I sometimes have exhibitions. I've already sold some of my paintings. I have a website, and all my paintings are on it. I'm going to go to an art school in Paris when I'm older.
Name.
Katie Varga.
Age.
11.
Country.
Hungary.
Talent.
Chess.
Unit 2. Extreme Nature. Listening 2. Read and listen.
Volcanoes. There are volcanoes all over the earth. They can be on land, underground, or under the sea. They can be dormant, which means they may erupt again, or they can be extinct, which means they will not erupt again. There are different types of volcanoes, and some are more dangerous than others. Volcanoes become dangerous when they erupt. Volcanoes erupt when red-hot rock, called magma, rises from inside the earth and comes out of a hole in the ground. Some of it flies into the air along with black ash. You can see this from many kilometers away. When the rock comes out of the hole, it is called lava, and it is so hot it is liquid. It can move across the land. Lava can destroy trees, roads, and homes. When lava cools, it becomes solid rock and forms a mountain shape. These types of volcanoes are called stratovolcanoes and are the most common type. One of the most famous stratovolcanoes is Mount Vesuvius in Italy. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and completely buried the city of Pompeii. In 1883, a stratovolcano called Krakatau in Indonesia erupted, destroying more than 100 towns and causing big changes to the environment and the climate. Mount Vesuvius is dormant and has not erupted since 1944. Krakatau erupted as recently as 2009. There are also volcanoes under the surface of the sea. These are called submarine volcanoes. If a submarine volcano erupts many times, it grows until it reaches the surface of the sea. The top forms an island. In 1963, fishermen near Iceland were surprised when they saw ash and steam rising from the sea. It was a submarine volcano. It grew and formed an island called Surtsey. The Hawaiian Islands, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, were also formed by submarine volcanoes millions of years ago. Now, they are visited by thousands of tourists every year, even though they are not extinct and could erupt at any time. Supervolcanoes are much bigger than stratovolcanoes and are underground. They are the most dangerous of all volcanoes. You can't see them, but you can see hot water and steam rising from thousands of holes. The largest supervolcano is in Yellowstone Park in the USA. If it erupted, the explosion would cause the sky to turn very dark, and there would be black rain. A supervolcano eruption would cause our climate to change completely. The temperature across the world would fall because the ash in the air would stop heat from the sun from reaching us. Even though the eruption might only last a few weeks, these changes would last for many years. Luckily, these volcanoes don't erupt very often, only once about every 600,000 years.
Unit 3. Ancient Civilizations. Listening 3. Read and listen.
The Shang Dynasty. What was life like in China 3,500 years ago? Was it very different to life now? What did people do? How did they live? Let's find out. The Kings. From 1700 until 1100 BC, the area of China around the Yellow River was ruled by a family of kings called the Shang. They were rich and very powerful. The king and his family lived in large palaces decorated with beautiful objects. They had many servants who made them food and did all the work in the palaces, so they had an easy life. When a king died, they buried him in an underground tomb and filled it with expensive objects, jewellery, works of art, and weapons. The people. The richest people of ancient China were priests and warriors. They lived in cities with very high walls. Their houses were large and made of wood or brick. They wore beautiful gowns made of silk. They didn't work and spent their time hunting and horse riding. Other people lived outside the walls, in houses made of mud. They were merchants and craftsmen, so they worked for their living. They were not poor, but they were not protected during wars. Most of the people during this time were farmers. They lived in villages in the countryside. They worked in fields with tools made of stone, grew grain such as rice, and kept animals. The best place for farming was by the Yellow River. Here the warm, wet conditions were perfect for growing rice. The farmers lived in small houses made of mud or bamboo. Inside there wasn't any furniture, and they slept on the mud floor. They were very poor. They had to obey the kings and the rich people all the time and give them food and gifts. They didn't have a very easy life. Important developments. During the time of the Shang, there were some interesting inventions. The Chinese discovered how to make bronze by mixing other metals together. Bronze is an important metal because it is strong and lasts for a very long time. The Chinese made all kinds of things from bronze: pots for cooking, cups for drinking, jewellery and weapons. But perhaps the most important development during the time of the Shang was writing. Once a civilization can write, people can pass on information about themselves, their lives, and what they believe. Although the Chinese started writing at this time, they didn't have paper yet, so people wrote on animal bones, on stone, on bamboo, and even on turtle shells. So, life for people in ancient China was quite different from our lives today.
Unit 4. Endangered Animals. Listening 4. Read and listen.
Polar bears. Polar bears are our biggest land predators, and they can look frightening. An adult male can weigh up to 600 kilograms and be 3 meters long. When a polar bear stands on 2 legs, it is taller than a man. Their habitat is snow and ice in cold northern countries like Alaska, Greenland and Canada. In winter, they travel across the frozen seas looking for prey. They eat seals and other animals, and they are excellent hunters. They have white fur, so it is difficult to see them in the snow. They have sharp, strong claws, which help them to catch and hold their prey. They also have long necks, small heads, and large, flat feet. This makes them very strong swimmers. Sadly, changes in climate mean that polar bears are now an endangered species. In places like Hudson Bay in Canada, temperatures have been getting warmer since 1950. This means that the sea has been freezing later every year, so the bears have less time to hunt on the ice. As a result, hungry bears go into towns looking for rubbish to eat. Conservationists have tried to keep the bears away from towns, but sometimes they have to catch them, as the bears can attack people when they are hungry. The bears are not killed. They are taken by helicopter far from the town, so that the animals can look for food in their normal habitat. Penguins. Penguins are birds, although they cannot fly. They are excellent swimmers because of their body shape and their wings, called flippers. They can dive deep into the sea to find prey. They eat krill, which are tiny sea animals, fish and squid. Their beaks are sharp, which helps them to catch prey, but also to fight. Penguin feathers are black on their backs and white on their fronts. In this way, they are camouflaged from their predators when they are swimming. Underwater predators like seals and sharks cannot see them very well against the light surface of the water. Flying predators like eagles find them difficult to see from the top against the dark ocean. There are different species of penguins living in different areas of the world, but almost all of them live in the southern hemisphere. Most penguin species have an extremely cold and icy habitat. They are one of the few animals that live in Antarctica. Like polar bears, penguins are becoming rare. This is partly due to climate change, but also due to water pollution killing their prey and oil spills from large ships. Other human activities are resulting in fewer penguins, including accidents with fishing nets and people collecting too many of their eggs. We must act carefully now to save penguins from becoming endangered.
Unit 5. Food Inventions. Listening 5. Read and listen.
Preserving food. For thousands of years, people have tried to find ways to keep food for longer. In the past, this was important, as people needed to save fresh food for times when it was hard to find, such as the winter. Today, there are still many places without electricity, and people living in these places need to preserve food in ways that don't use fridges. They need to make food last as long as possible. Why doesn't food last? The problem is that all food can grow bacteria, and bacteria spoils food. To preserve food, you have to destroy the bacteria or slow down their growth. There are different ways to do this. 1. Drying. Drying is the oldest type of food preservation. If water is removed from food, the bacteria can't grow. In ancient times in hot countries, people simply left fruit and meat outside to dry in the sun and the wind until all its natural water was gone. This made the fruit last a very long time. Drying fruit sometimes results in a completely new product. For example, grapes turn into raisins and plums turn into prunes. Drying food in the sun does not work in cooler or wetter climates. But people have other methods to preserve food in cold places. 2. Salting. Salting food, especially meat and fish, is another very old way to preserve food. Bacteria cannot grow in a very salty environment, so salted food lasts a long time. In many countries, salt fish or meat has become a traditional food, and people still eat it today. For example, in Portugal, the national dish is salt codfish, and although people could buy fresh fish and refrigerate it, they prefer to eat the preserved fish. 3. Canning. A more modern way to preserve food was discovered in 1809 by an inventor called Nicolas Appert. He found that if food is heated at high temperatures and then sealed in a container, the food lasts for months. This is because the bacteria are killed when they are heated and cannot grow again without air. Vegetables and fizzy drinks in cans and jam and juice in bottles are preserved using this method. 4. Freezing. Another newer method of food preservation is freezing. In the 1900s, a scientist called Clarence Birdseye went to the Arctic. He noticed that when fish was caught, it froze quickly in the icy conditions. He realized that freezing food slowed down the growth of bacteria. Back home, he invented a way of fast freezing food. Frozen food was first sold in 1930 and was very popular, especially in North America. Today, millions of people have freezers in their homes. All sorts of food, from vegetables to pizza, is frozen in factories before it is transported to supermarkets for us to buy.
Unit 6. Old and New. Listening 6. Read and listen.
What can you do with an old building that isn't used anymore? Why not restore it and use it for something else? Here are some examples of old buildings that have been transformed into museums. The Roubaix Museum. It's difficult to imagine a swimming pool becoming a museum, isn't it? Well, that is exactly what happened in the small French town of Roubaix. The beautiful building was first built in 1927 and was used as a swimming pool until 1985. People then decided to reopen the building as an art gallery. Since then, the original designs have been carefully restored. The building has been filled with fantastic collections of paintings, sculptures, and textiles. But the best thing about the new museum is the room with the swimming pool. The pool is much smaller, and you can't swim in it now. But it is really amazing. There are statues all around it. The sun shines through the beautifully restored windows into the gallery, and it all looks spectacular. The museum is still called La Piscine. That's French for swimming pool. The Thanjavur Art Gallery. It's not often that you can visit a palace, but if you go to Thanjavur in India, you can spend as long as you like exploring one. Tanjavur is one of the oldest cities in India. It is well known for its beautiful architecture, its music, and its art. One of the best tourist attractions is the Tanjavur Art Gallery, which is in a 17th century palace. Before the building was transformed into a gallery, it had been unused for years. Since it has become a gallery, it has been filled with bronze and stone sculptures, paintings, and musical instruments. There's also a library full of ancient documents and a music hall. It's an unforgettable and historical place to visit. The Nomadic Museum. Perhaps the most incredible transformation is the Nomadic Museum. Designed by a Japanese architect, this art gallery was created from 148 metal shipping containers and recycled paper tubes. Although this gallery is made from old, used materials, it is truly an amazing building and a fascinating example of modern architecture. The gallery was created in 2005 to show an exhibition of photographs to people around the world. How would it reach all these people? The museum is nomadic. It actually travels around the world. Because it's made of shipping containers, it can be shipped overseas. It has already been to New York, Tokyo, and Mexico City. Maybe it will come to your country soon.
Unit 7. Moving Pictures. Listening 7. Read and listen.
The history of film. Frequently asked questions. Who invented films? It's difficult to say. Lots of people played a part in the development of the cinema. A man called Muybridge made the first moving picture in 1878. It was a film of a horse running, and it was only a few seconds long. By 1895, other people had invented various machines for showing moving pictures, but many of these could only be watched by one person at a time. The development of machines that could project films onto a screen was important. Thomas Edison was one of the first to show very short films to audiences of 20 or more people. His films showed acrobats and dancers performing, or everyday events like a man sneezing. What were early films like? At first, films were only a few minutes long. They were black and white and silent. They were usually documentaries about different places, or news events, or comedies showing people falling over and making funny faces. Later, they became longer stories, but there was still no sound. Instead, there might be a musician playing a piano in the hall while the film was shown. What were the most popular kinds of early films? Musicals were probably the most popular kind of film throughout the 1930s and 1940s. A very famous actress and singer at that time was Shirley Temple. She was only a 5-year-old girl, but everyone loved watching her sing and dance. When did films get colour and sound? The very first movie to be in colour and to have sound was shown in 1927. It was called The Jazz Singer. From then on, more and more films were produced in colour, and almost all films had sound. When were cartoons invented? Cartoons, or animated films, were first made in the 1890s. Cartoons are made from hundreds of drawings, photographed one by one. Each drawing is slightly different from the one before. When they are shown very quickly, it looks like the characters and objects in the drawings are moving. One of the earliest animated movies and the very first Disney feature-length film was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Until that time, cartoons had been short and only shown before the main movie. Now cartoons are watched by children and adults alike in cinemas. How are films different today? Many films are now made using computers. Computer-generated imagery, or CGI, are pictures that are made on computers. They are used for special effects in films. For example, the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and the scenes in Titanic when the ship is sinking were done with CGI. Toy Story was the first feature-length film created completely with CGI in 1995.
Unit 8. Once Upon a Time. Listening 8. Read and listen.
The Greedy Farmer. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who lived in a small village. He was not very wealthy, but he was very ambitious. He wanted to make more and more money. In the springtime, when it was rainy, he called out, "If it were sunny, I could plant some wheat. I wish it were sunny." The next day, by chance, it became sunny, and the farmer planted some wheat. After a few weeks, he began to get impatient. His crop needed rain now. He called out, "If it were rainy, it would be useful for my wheat." The following day, it rained. Now he thought he could get everything he wanted. The very next day, he called out, "If it rained more, my wheat would grow higher and higher." The following day, it rained again. That summer, he had the biggest and best crop he had ever had. He harvested his wheat and collected it in a big pile. He should have been happy, but he was so greedy he called out, "If it had rained even more, my wheat harvest would have been even bigger." Suddenly, heavy rain began to pour. It rained harder and harder and didn't stop until all of the farmer's wheat washed away with the water.
Brotherly love. A long, long time ago, two brothers lived in a village. They were both farmers and grew corn. The older brother had many children to feed, so he had very little money. The younger brother also had a big family to look after. Although the brothers were poor, they lived happily. One year there was a drought and the corn did not grow well. The brothers collected their small harvest and stored the grain in their barns. That night, the older brother could not sleep. He was worried about his brother. Would he have enough grain to feed his family? At last, the older brother got out of bed. He went to his barn and filled a bag with grain. Then he went silently to his brother's house and secretly added the grain to his brother's pile. Every night he did the same thing. He took some of his own grain and added it to his brother's store. But after a while, he noticed something strange. His pile of grain never looked smaller in the morning. One night, he decided to find out why. After it had got dark, he hid near his barn and watched. At last, a man approached with his own bag of grain. At first, he did not know who it was. Then he was amazed to see his own brother. Every night, the younger brother had done the same thing, taken grain from his own pile to give to his brother. It was true brotherly love.
Unit 9. Rescued. Listening 9. Read and listen.
Father and son rescued at sea. Last Friday morning, Australian man Ben Hammond and his teenage son Michael were rescued from their fishing boat in the Coral Sea. They had set off from Murray Island, off the northeast coast of Australia, 20 days earlier, on a fishing trip. They had only planned to go for a few hours. "Everything was great at first," said Mr. Hammond. "The weather was fine and the fishing was good. But then there was a sudden wind. We lost control and were sent out to sea. The wind was the beginning of a massive storm. After a few days, their boat ran out of fuel. They couldn't call for help because their mobile phones had no signal, so they turned them off to save the batteries. Rescuers had difficulty finding them because of the storm. However, the storm may have saved their lives." "It was lucky the weather was quite bad," said Michael. "If it hadn't rained, we wouldn't have had anything to drink. We only had 2 bottles of water to begin with." Over the next few weeks, they just tried to stay alive and well. They protected themselves from the sun by covering their heads. They managed to catch some fish, which they ate raw. And they drank the rainwater. Eventually, they discovered they had a mobile phone signal. They sent text messages to their family. The emergency services found them, and a rescue helicopter was sent to pick them up. They were taken to a clinic, where they were treated for sunburn and dehydration. Mr. Hammond had lost over 20 kilograms. He said, "I'm just happy to be alive."
Helicopter rescues men on mountain. 2 French men were airlifted by helicopter from Mount Snowdon in Wales yesterday evening. Luc Morel and Marc Dubois had set out in the morning when the weather had been good. They had reached the peak and were on their way back down. Unfortunately, at about 4 p.m, it had started to rain, and then the mist had come in. It was difficult to see, and Mark slipped and fell. "We wouldn't have gone if we had known about the bad weather," said Mark. "But we hadn't listened to the weather forecast." Luke used his mobile to phone the emergency services, and a dramatic rescue operation took place. "If they hadn't phoned so early, we wouldn't have found them," said one rescue worker. "If they had left it longer, it would have been dark." The rescue operation lasted for about 2 hours. Fortunately, Mark wasn't badly injured. They were both wet and tired, but they were well and happy to be back down.
Unit 10. Languages. Listening 10. Read and listen.
Voices of India. India has an incredible number of different languages. There are 22 major languages and over 1,600 regional dialects or varieties of those languages. Hindi is the official language of India and has more than 250 million speakers. But many people don't speak the official language at all. Traditionally, the language that people learnt and spoke depended on where they lived. For example, people who lived in the Assam region of India spoke Assamese, though now people there may speak Hindi or Bengali, or even English. Some of the Indian languages are extremely old. One of the earliest known written scripts in the world came from India. It is called Harappan, and it has pictures like Egyptian hieroglyphs. The problem is that nobody can read or understand Harappan today. Sanskrit is also an ancient language. Some of the written stories in Sanskrit are more than 5,000 years old. But Sanskrit is almost a dead language, as few people actually speak it today. There are only around 200,000 people who can speak Sanskrit well. These days, English is very widely spoken, especially in government and education. and it is sometimes called the working language of India. Although people have many different mother tongues, English is often the second language which is acquired once formal education begins. But English is not the dominant language in every aspect of Indian life. In homes across the country, hundreds of very old dialects are being passed on from generation to generation. Outside the home, films are being produced, and newspapers and books are being written in all the major languages, and over 50 languages are taught in schools. So, is it difficult having all these different languages? We talked to some school children in India to find out.
Haresh, 11, Kashmir. I'm from Kashmir. I speak Urdu because it's the official language here. Most of my classes are taught in Urdu. I also speak Kashmiri because my parents speak it at home to me, and I speak a little English at school. I think learning languages is important because it's important to communicate with people.
Samir, 12, Delhi. I live in a big city called Delhi. It is really multilingual here. I speak Punjabi at home because my older relatives don't understand any other language. Some of my friends speak different languages at home. I'm learning English at school, but I also learn lots of English by watching English cartoons on TV. So I think it's fun to learn other languages.
Mala, 11, Rajasthan. I live in Rajasthan and Hindi is my first language. I'm learning English at school. My parents speak a dialect called Malvi. I speak this a little too, but I can't write anything in Malvi. I prefer speaking and writing in Hindi. I really like watching Hindi films. I'm glad I can speak different languages.
Unit 11. Study skills. Listening 11. Read and listen.
Study skills. Are you learning English? Do you like English but find it difficult to remember new grammar and vocabulary? Would you like some ideas about how to make your language learning easier? If you answered yes to any of those questions, here's some advice that we hope will help. Learning vocabulary. Each time you learn a new word, write it in a vocabulary book with its part of speech. You don't have to translate the word into your language. Try using a synonym to help you remember what it means. You should also look it up in a dictionary and write the English definition. When your teacher asks you to learn some words for a vocabulary test, you should write them down on a piece of paper or a sticky note and put them on your bedroom wall. Every time you see the words, you will think about their spellings and their meanings. Draw spidergrams. These are fun to do. Draw a circle and write the name of a topic in the middle. Draw lines from the circle to other shapes and write the names of subtopics in the middle of those. Then, draw lines from each of these shapes and write words connected with the topics. Learning grammar. After you've learnt a new grammar point at school, you should go home and look through what you did in the lesson. Look at sentences in your course book and highlight examples of the new grammar. You could use a coloured pen to underline the examples or circle them. Then, in a notebook, write the name of the new grammar point, for example, the past simple, and then write simple sentences about yourself using the new grammar. So, if you've just learnt the past simple, Write some sentences about what you did yesterday. Make a test for a friend or your brother or sister. This can be a lot of fun. Because you are doing this with a friend, you won't be nervous. Write 5 to 8 sentences using the grammar point. Then you can erase the verb or just leave a blank space where the verb should be. Your friend should try to write the verb correctly. You will be learning as you write the test, and then your friend can make a test for you too. Remember, if you are not sure about something, you should always ask a teacher, parent, or friend for help. Asking questions is one of the best ways to learn.
Unit 12. It's holiday time. Listening 12. Read and listen.
Do you wish you were on a beach where the sand is golden and the water is crystal clear? Do you wish you could explore the wonders of the deep blue sea? Do you dream of camping in the desert under the stars? Imagine a holiday where you could do all of these things and more. Welcome to Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh is one of Egypt's biggest and most popular resorts. It lies south of the Sinai Peninsula, between the desert and the Red Sea. The climate is hot and sunny all year round, and there are lots of exciting activities for everyone. The amazing Red Sea. The Red Sea is famous for its sea life and clear, beautiful water. You can snorkel close to the shore in places such as Garden Reef Bay and see colourful tropical fish and other incredible sea creatures swimming amongst the coral. There are around 1,500 different types of sea life along the coast and over 400 species of coral. For the more adventurous visitors, the Red Sea is perfect for scuba diving. Don't worry if it's your first time. You can take a course at a diving school with trained instructors who will teach you everything you need to know. You can then go on a diving trip where you will discover the amazing sights of the deep sea and may even come across an ancient shipwreck. If you want to see what lies under the surface of the sea, but don't want to go in the water, take an hour-long trip in a glass-bottomed boat instead. See the brightly coloured fish swimming right under your feet. The spectacular Sinai Desert. If you prefer to stay on dry land, the desert offers all kinds of thrilling adventures. If excitement is what you want, try quad biking across the dunes. If you're looking for a quieter kind of adventure, go on an organised group safari where you'll spot rare and beautiful birds and have the truly unforgettable experience of a camel ride. At night, you can camp in the open air, under the starry sky. Imagine watching the sun rise over the desert when you wake up. The treasures of Nama Bay. No visit to Sharm el-Sheikh would be complete without finding some fantastic souvenirs to remember your holiday. Nama Bay is the place to go for shopping. Here you will find whatever you are looking for, from beautiful silver jewellery in the modern shops to traditional handicrafts like carpets and bags in the busy, colourful markets. Nama Bay is also home to some of the region's most luxurious hotels, and you will find restaurants offering some of Egypt's most delicious dishes. So, if you're looking for an experience you'll never forget, come to Sharm el-Sheikh on your next holiday. We are waiting to welcome you.